£4 billion in tax cuts. Michael Howard's election promise. He says he'll reduce government waste.
When government becomes the biggest growth industry in town, you can be sure that the rest of the economy is heading for trouble.
Conservatives say they can save £35 billion without damaging frontline services. But Labour disagrees. We'll be assessing which taxes the Tories might cut. Also tonight, Muslim schools row. The Ofsted chief says they could undermine British society. The Josie Russell murder appeal. Was Michael Stone jailed on unreliable evidence? And Hogarth, the hero, the record-breaking bowling that gave England victory in South Africa.
And the main story from UTV Live tonight, a man has been charged with the manslaughter of 11-year-old County Cork boy Robert Houlihan.
Good evening. At last we now know the Conservatives will offer tax cuts to try to win the next election. Michael Howard and his Shadow Chancellor Oliver Letwin said today they've earmarked £4 billion by cutting what they say is waste in current government spending. They didn't say which taxes they'll cut. They did promise, though, to make their first cuts in their first budget, if they're elected. And they said they'll still be able to increase spending on health, schools and transport. Our senior political correspondent John Ray joins us now. John?
Trevor, it was as if they played their trump card today. The Tories will tempt us with tax cuts. At the same time, they say they'll spend more on vital public services. This is not a trick that has been pulled off before. So is this a good thing or just too good to be true? Is this the moment when things finally start looking up for the Tories? Today, they sounded like men who found the holy grail of politics.
We can have good local services and lower taxes. No one has to take us on trust. What we promise, we will deliver. Our proposals are reasonable, responsible and achievable.
Trust achieved, say the Tories, because this is simply waste not, want not on a vast scale. So they claim they can match Labour's big increases for the NHS by scrapping strategic health authorities and sacking bureaucrats, saving £7.9 billion. The Tories claim they can spend as much as Labour on schools and abolish student fees by scrapping some school inspections and red tape, total saving £5.6 billion. And they say they'll increase spending on police, paying for it by binning Labour's asylum policies. The Home Office wastes, they say, £2.6 billion.
We have taken in these plans decisions not about the saving of paperclips, but about the reduction in the level of government activity in areas outside our priorities.
Hello Abdul, my name is Shakira and you've been referred for New Deal.
In other words, real people doing real jobs, like the public servants who offer the unemployed the New Deal. Under the Tories, they too would be looking for new jobs. The message is, if it's not hurting, it's not working.
Now, voters are not naive. They will not believe any politician who offers them something for nothing. So what the Tories need to do is convince people they'll safeguard those really important public services and that those that they axe really don't offer value for money.
But Labour argues voters won't fall for what is a Conservative confidence trick.
So when they hear Michael Howard promising tax cuts and promising extra spending on schools and hospitals, they look upwards and see skies full of flying pigs.
And we will be extremely interested to hear what Oliver Letwin has to say about what cuts, what level of unemployment, what closure of services, what withdrawal of facilities this will mean, seat by seat by seat.
One Tory MP has already delivered his verdict on Conservative plans by defecting to Labour. But in the skies above Westminster tonight, no sign yet of Mr Milburn's flying pigs. John Ray, ITV News.
So, do the Conservative sums add up? And will their plans for tax cuts buy them enough votes to win the election? Our political correspondent Libby Wiener has been looking at the figures for tonight's briefing.
Trevor, the Conservatives believe they can find the money for tax cuts by reducing waste. At the moment, nearly 5.5 million people are on the government payroll, 500,000 more than when Labour came to power. The Conservatives say they can cut that by 235,000, about 5%. How? Well, they'll scrap or replace 168 public bodies. These are just a few of them. In the battle to cut red tape, the Tories say they would more than match Labour. The government's review found savings of £22 billion. The Conservatives say they can find £35 billion. Of that, £23 billion will go on improving public services, £8 billion on cutting national debt, and crucially £4 billion for tax cuts. That's roughly equivalent to £170 a year for each household. So how could it be used? Well, raising the level of tax-free income from £4,700 to £5,000 would use up most of it, £3.7 billion. Or it could be used to put up the inheritance tax threshold from £263,000 to £500,000. That would cost £1.6 billion. Then there'd be almost enough to raise the top rate tax threshold as well, from £36,000 to £40,000. The cost, £2.6 billion. Tax can clinch an election.
Back in 1992, the Tories deployed a deadly campaign message which sank Labour's hopes. Their bombshell slogan followed by the equally withering double whammy. Michael Howard had good reason to smile then, but in 2001, Oliver Letwin came unstuck when he let slip the Tories were planning cuts of £20 billion. So how effective is their message now?
In order to have really noticeable tax cuts by the standard of what's happened to the tax burden in the past, then you'd probably need to go further, and that means further spending cuts in the future, which the Conservatives have said they can deliver, but they haven't explained in detail how they do it.
£4 billion may not be enough to put money back in all our pockets, but the Tories hope that it's a tempting enough offer to woo back some of their supporters when election day dawns. Trevor.
Libby Vina. Let's return now to John Ray at Westminster. John, is this as good as it gets for the Tories? Is it the best they can do?
Well, it's their big idea, Trevor. It's their unique selling point for the election. They hope, they believe it could be the beginning of a turning point against Labour. And let's face it, the Tories do need a turning point after the miserable few weeks and months they've had. I think there are two important points to make about this. If you look at the size of those tax cuts, as Libby was saying, they're actually quite modest. They're not that big. I think the real plan today was to first of all reassure the public that the Tories could be trusted on public services. To that extent, they are fighting on Labour territory. But having said that, there are now real significant differences between the parties. The Tories' figures will be taken seriously. People will pore over looking for the flaws in it. But at the end of the day, what it comes down to is not the detail, it's whether people actually trust Michael Howard to deliver.
John Ray, thank you. The head of Ofsted, the school standard watchdog, made the controversial observation today that Islamic faith schools fail to equip their pupils properly for life in Britain. His remarks were immediately condemned by Muslim leaders as highly irresponsible. There are some 300 independent faith schools in Britain. Among the biggest groups, there are 50 such Jewish schools, around 100 evangelical Christian, and another 110 Muslim schools, which teach some 20,000 young people. Tim Rogers' report from one such school in Manchester.
They've been showing parents and new pupils around the Islamic High School for Girls in Manchester tonight.
Produce good work.
Proud of their achievements, the standard of their teaching, and the curriculum, which they say is second to none.
We offer the national curriculum to a very large extent. And part of the national curriculum is teaching citizenship, teaching children about their responsibility to society.
So convinced is the Ali family from Huddersfield that they're prepared to send their daughter 35 miles each way every day to ensure she gets the education they believe she needs. But it's schools like this that now find themselves responding to concern from the head of Ofsted, who says they mustn't be allowed to threaten the coherence of British society.
I worry that many young people are being educated in faith-based schools with little appreciation of their wider responsibilities and obligations to British society.
Religious segregation, he says, must not put social coherence at risk.
That is ridiculous. I say it's ridiculous because it's been said by somebody who probably hasn't visited our schools. Because I can confidently say that our curriculum is one of the most enriched
In Islamic schools across the country, the reaction to David Bell's speech has been anger, accusing him of Islamophobia, stirring up controversy senior politicians might have thought best to avoid. Tonight, though, the Ali family say they have no doubts about whether this is the right school for their daughter.
The Islamic schools teach them moral values. They teach them about all religions, not just Islam.
Iman will be joining